Today we're going to be replacing the front wheel bearing and hub assembly on a 2011 Buick Lacrosse. The symptoms that you're going to see on this to know that your wheel bearing and hub assembly needs to replace is either you hear a howling noise going down the highway, or more commonly on some of these GM front wheel drive vehicles in these years is you're going to have the service engine light going off telling you that one of your wheel speed sensors is backed. Typically that's not the problem. The problem is actually the hub, because the ring around here is what's bad on that and is throwing off that sensor. So you do need to replace this 9 times out of 10 if you get one of those lights to go off. So let me show you how you can very easily replace this yourself and save yourself hundreds of dollars on this 2011 Lacrosse. To get started here, set the emergency brake and make sure you use a good quality jack and jack stand on the vehicle. Then we'll go ahead and remove the wheel, and it's just going to be a 22 mil. The next thing we're going to do here is remove this axle nut. I have a whole set over there that I got from GEARWRENCH many years ago. It came in handy. If you don't have that, you can always go rent these at the auto parts store. It's just going to be a 32 mil. And if you don't have an impact, make sure you put a screwdriver or something in over here to prevent that from turning if you're going to use a breaker bar. Then we're going to remove the brake caliper and bracket here. First thing we'll do is we'll lift up on this hose, so gently pry this up like that, and that'll just give us a little bit more leverage so we can get this up out of the way. We just don't want to put an unnecessary bind on there. And we just got 2 21 mil bolts back here, so we'll take those off here, then we'll take a brake hanger and we'll hang it up on our strut to get it out of the way. Then we'll take a brake hanger and we'll set this up out of the way. Then we'll remove the rotor, and that's just held in by one T30 here. And then the rotor should come right off. And if it doesn't want to come off initially and you're going to be reusing your rotor, just get a wood block like this and just gently tap on both sides, and also you can hit in here. Eventually it will pop loose. Now we're ready to remove our hub from our knuckle back here. And in order to do that, we just have 3 18 mil bolts that are holding this in place. And sometimes you can get easy access to these, and other times you don't. So what you can do is rotate the wheel one way or the other, and it'll give you some clearance in order to get your ratchet in there to remove all 3 of those bolts. Before we remove these, we'll take a wire brush and just get a little of that corrosion off the end of this bolt. It'll make it a little bit easier to get these removed. And to remove this top one, because it's typically the hardest one to remove, just take a shallow 18, a longer extension, and it should fit right back in there. Then you should be able to remove it. And sometimes they don't want to come out, so what we can do is we'll rotate the wheel the other direction, and it should get a little bit of that bind off there, and we can always push in our axle a little bit and get that bolt out of there. And we'll rotate the wheel once more to get that third bolt out. Then we'll remove our wheel speed sensor, and it's just going to be a 10 mil. And now we should be able to remove our hub. So just give it a couple whacks here. Make sure you hold it so it doesn't fall. Alright, so after hitting that thing for about a minute, it's on there pretty good. I'm not going to mess with it any longer. I'm going to get my slide hammer out here and remove this. If you don't have one of these and you're in this scenario, you can always go to your local auto parts store and they'll rent these for free. But a couple hits of this and it should pop it right off of there. After fighting with this thing for a couple minutes, it is really corroded on there. I tried a hub puller, a slide hammer, a bunch of heat, PB blaster. I'm not messing with it anymore. I have to replace this axle anyways. So I pop that out so I can have some clearance in the back so I can hit it directly with the hammer, and hopefully this thing will pop out. Alright, we finally got that off, and I don't know if you can pick that up in the video, but it is really corroded in there pretty bad. And I'm not sure I've had one this bad in probably years, but it was really stuck on there. So hopefully yours comes off a little easier than mine. But once you get it off here, we'll clean this up with a wire brush, and then we'll go ahead and get ready to install our new one. Alright, now for the install, I typically like to put a little bit of this wheel bearing grease on here, just to help that slide in there a little bit better. And the other call out here is these bolts here for the wheel hub, they're torque to yield, so you need to make sure you replace them. I'll put a link in the description where you can get these. You need to make sure you get 3 new bolts there. We'll put our brake shield back up here, and we'll go ahead and start tightening the 3 bolts here for the wheel bearing. And when you're tightening these, just make sure you're going through here and you're setting each one of these evenly. So just don't tighten one side, just evenly tighten them and it'll press that in there. Alright, so after we get those all snugged up, then we're going to torque them to spec, and it's going to be 74 foot-pounds plus an additional 75 degrees. Alright, so there was the 74. Now we'll do one final pass of 75 degrees on all 3 of the bolts. Then reinstall the wheel speed sensor here, and then just gently tighten this up. Then we'll reinstall the rotor, but before we do that, we'll just put a little bit of anti-seize on here. You don't got to get crazy with this, just put a little bit on there to help that from corroding in the future. Then we'll set our rotor up here and just pay attention to that hole. We need to make sure we line that up for our T30. Then we'll reinstall our brake caliper and bracket. Just make sure when you're installing this that you don't get this hose in an unnecessary bind. And also the bolts on here are torque to yield. Again, I'll put the bolts in the description there, the part numbers. You need to make sure you replace those because those are a one-time use as well. Then we'll reattach this brake hose over here. Then the torque on these two bolts is going to be 111 foot-pounds plus an additional 45 degrees, then plus an additional 15 degrees. Alright, so there was the 111, then we're going to do an additional 45 degrees. Alright, then we'll do one final pass of 15 degrees. And I wouldn't get too carried away with this, just do the best you can on there. Alright, so then the last thing, we just want to tighten up our axle nut. And the torque on this is going to be 111 foot-pounds. Then we're going to back it off 45 degrees. Then we're going to re-torque it to 184 foot-pounds. Just make sure when you're doing this, put something in the fin of this rotor here to prevent that from spinning. Alright, so there's the 111. Then we'll back it off 45 degrees. Then we'll retorque that to 184. Alright, so there's the 184. Alright, so after you get that torque to spec, then just go through here and make sure everything looks good, and you've completed your job here. So hopefully this helped you out. If it did, please give me a thumbs up. If you're interested in more content like this, please hit that subscribe. But again, I hope this helped you out, and thanks for watching.